Good afternoon, everybody. Today's video is going to focus on something a little different, but something I've been playing with, and there's up-and-coming videos related to this concept of using Red Hat Advanced Cluster Manager and potentially running a control plane operator within the cluster manager to manage ingress traffic to your clusters, whether those are active clusters, whether those are active standby clusters, or whether we're doing a ratio-based traffic spraying or AB blue-green canary-based type testing. And so that's really the discussion here. But before we get in there, I really want to talk about my perspective, my experience with Red Hat Advanced Cluster Manager. Now, the reason why I'm creating this video is because the content on YouTube actually is, from what I could find, is actually not relevant or updated. It's great content, specifically from the Red Hat PMs that were introducing the Red Hat Advanced Cluster Manager, but the content is not of 2024. And so simply, here's what I'm going to go ahead and put out there. I spent a couple of weeks looking for content, kind of coming up to speed, kind of figuring out what I can do. But then again, really what I was doing is playing with it. And so what I want to kind of show you is kind of what I learned. So my goal here is to create a local cluster. Think of it as really just a kind of control plane cluster. So what I did was I went and installed using the IPI provisioning on VMware. Think of it as a control plane cluster. And I provisioned OpenShift 4.14. Very small cluster, but very stable cluster. So what I did was I used the same, think of it as I used the same ESX host that I would kind of put in my management plane within ESX. And so it's an isolated, it's on a special network. There's not that much changes. It's kind of where I run my DNS, DHCP. It's kind of like that infrastructure, almost like where I run my vCentral from, right? Very similar. And so this would be my management cluster that would then go and manage all of my OpenShift clusters. And, being part of F5 and being the PM for CIS, the goal here is to run CIS within the management cluster. At least that's the thought. And so I am getting a lot of questions about this, and this is kind of the topic. And there are some questions that I'm actually going to bring up about this architecture in another video. But today's video is 100% focused on Red Hat Advanced Cluster Management and why should you use it? And again, this is from an F5 perspective, it's from my perspective, but I'm a heavy user of OpenShift, at least from doing a lot of these testings. So the documentation is actually pretty good. You can actually go and find this on your traditional Red Hat page. And you can see here that kind of like this is really what it is. It's a cluster manager for Kubernetes control of clusters and applications. I like the way that they say Kubernetes. I don't know if you're going to use this for just Red Hat OpenShift or if you're going to use this for Red Hat OpenShift as well as other clusters of Kubernetes. And unfortunately, that's one thing I did not try. But having said that, I do have Kubernetes clusters and there's nothing to stop me because of the import. When I imported this, and I'm going to show you, there's nothing to stop you from using just Kubernetes. And so that's why it's actually pretty cool that, sure, it's Red Hat Cluster Manager. But I think from a Red Hat perspective, there's something that I really like. I didn't test it, but I want to test it to kind of see what happens. And I'll show you that in a second. So this is what's really cool. To be able to control your clusters and applications. I don't know what that means, but I'm going to play with it from a single console. And so let's go ahead and take a look at what that means, because I really want to cut to the point where the installation is what's important. So this is really all you have to do is you take a local cluster. So this would be a local cluster. So if I overview this local cluster, you can kind of see it here. It's my technology PM cluster. And again, it's running on VMware. You can see it's very stable. I love this. Update cluster. Wow. I want to try it. Now, I went for the standard 6-node cluster. I tried to actually, to be honest with you, only install two to 3 nodes, but the installation failed. And so I was talking to Red Hat about it. I don't have time to troubleshoot it, so I went back to just doing the vanilla, unmodified simple IPI install, and it worked. And so update cluster. Okay, cool. But you'll notice here that there's this local cluster. So this is my local cluster. So I went into this local cluster, operator hub, and then of course I typed in RedHat. And when you type in RedHat cluster, let's see if I can find it. Okay, RedHat. It might be advanced cluster. Advanced. Okay, maybe it's just because it's installed. But what I did was I looked for, oh, there it is. I just saw it right there. It was like, cluster manager. That's it. So basically what I did was I simply just installed this. I didn't do anything else. It was so simple. I think that previous versions, pre 4.14, you had to do a lot of other stuff like create secrets and stuff. I didn't do anything, to be honest. I just installed it. And I was wondering if I had to create some, because that's what kind of like the previous YouTube video showed. But in my case, it was just a very, very, very simple install of the operator. And then once the operator is installed, you can actually go to this installed operator. And here's where you actually manage. And here's where you actually create the multi-cluster. And so as you can see, my multi-cluster is actually created. But the interesting thing from a multi-cluster perspective is that what you have to do is once it's installed, you actually don't manage it from here anymore. You actually go up to the top here. You can actually see a local cluster, and then there's all clusters. And then here, there's this thing called Get Started with Multi-Cluster Hub. I guess, like, honestly, it's not that easy. But now you can actually connect to your cloud cluster. And so what I did is I just imported an existing cluster, gave it a name, and believe it or not, just cut and pasted the kube config. I mean, how easy can that be, right? Maybe it's too easy. Maybe I'm just being optimistic here. But now, what happened is it actually imported my cluster straight away. No errors. I mean, that is pretty cool, right? There is my OpenShift PM cluster. Now, I've been using this cluster for a while. I gotta be honest. It's almost ready to kind of be upgraded. But look at that. Now, can I upgrade it from here? I mean, to 58 from 7? Probably. Am I going to try it? Hell yeah. Totally going to try it. So, I got to admit, this is pretty cool. This is really, really, really cool. So, I'm going to add a Kubernetes cluster to this as well, because I think that what you're going to see now, from my perspective, is, you know, since Big IP CIS is the operator for Big IP, since Big IP is outside of the cluster, the ultimate goal is to distribute traffic or get traffic to the cluster that you want to get it to. So there's really no reason why CIS should run in a worker cluster. CIS should run in Advanced Cluster Manager, or it doesn't really run in Advanced Server Management cluster. That's really the operator that really is the function that adds to this. It just adds to the existing cluster. CIS runs, think about it as the local cluster or the management cluster. I wish I could rename that to like management cluster instead of local cluster, but I understand what that is. And so now you can see I've got two clusters. They're both from vSphere. You can see that this is the hub. So that's basically, I think, what they're calling it. They're calling it the hub. And then, of course, you can see here's the standalone cluster. So what can I see when it comes to applications? So can I see applications, and can I filter this based on default cluster and OpenShift cluster? Look at that. But now, can I filter based on a namespace? Because I see that there's a lot here, but this is great, but this is all of OpenShift. Right? And so, you know, why can I see my applications that I've created? And so it looks like there's 33 items in here. And so, yeah, so I can only see stuff of, nope, not true. I can see the nginx operator, which I deployed 7 months ago. But where is some other stuff? So I'm not sure why it's showing OpenShift here. But in any case, this is actually really, really, really interesting. So you can actually create applications from here. Let me just remove this filter. So if I actually go and create an application, It's an application subset. Okay, and so now you can actually go and install the operator. So I'm sure that probably what this will do, operator get up. So this will probably take us to operator hub, and then it will install this. And so maybe not. I'm just going to go ahead and leave this form. But that's really not, I think my point here is not necessarily I'm going to manage applications from this hub. I think my true sense of this is great for like upgrading and kind of like out of band stuff that becomes really difficult. Also to see the status of the cluster, I think that's huge. I'm sure you can deploy applications, but I may be wrong, and I'd be love to get some feedback. Applications, are they still going to be deployed locally within the cluster? I think that's kind of like how pipelines work, that you would kind of push your pipeline down to the local cluster. But again, I'm not sure. I think this is so new. There's a lot of automation and host inventory here. I think this is actually kind of cool. Again, I haven't played with this. I haven't played with this one as well. You can also see the cluster pools. Just the kind of like I guess you can go out and actually discover clusters as well. So this is actually really interesting. So how I got here is once I installed the operator, I actually went out to all clusters that shows up here, and then I actually went to get started with, and then I imported the cluster. Honestly, it's that simple, right? And so now I have my 2 clusters, and I'm going to add a couple other clusters here, and I can go ahead and manage and kind of do what I want to do. So that's really all I wanted to show you in this video. Very, very, very simple video of using a Red Hat advanced cluster management for Kubernetes. In my case, it's all OpenShift. Obviously from a F5er perspective, and kind of like how we can kind of manage that with Big IP being the gateway, the traffic manager to get traffic into that cluster, right? Because that's obviously the most important thing. And when we get traffic, we ingress traffic to any service or any pod, kind of like any endpoint of your choosing, right? That could be HA proxy, nginx. It could be an application pod. It could be Istio. Kong. It's really up to you kind of at that point. But it's getting traffic to that cluster or across clusters. And from a management perspective, we're now taking a viewpoint of standing outside the local cluster and kind of like looking at it from an entire environment perspective. So that's the video. If you like it, give it a thumbs up. If you're not subscribed, please subscribe. My goal is to get to 1,000 subscribers. I'm almost there. If you want other videos, I've got another one coming from a manufacturer that hit me up this morning. I'm going to create that next. You guys probably know who you are. You'll see that hopefully by Friday. And watch for some up-and-coming content with CIS running in the local cluster, managing other clusters, just like this cluster manager does it. That is coming up next as well.